second is just how different the information streams are for not just generations, but for that group's male and female, younger, for younger people.
Mm-hmm.
The Taylor Swift endorsement, I think it was something that everybody was talking about. Oh, this is going to be a great way for Taylor Swift to win over young voters. For the guys that hang out with my son and my son who he hangs out with and the stuff that they're watching, the YouTube channels and the Instagrams and all of that.
Yeah.
There's a lot that is that's more Trump centric.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Taylor Swift thing is not surprising to him because it sort of reinforces what's already being sort of put out there in the world, which is the women who want more women in power, who are already empowered themselves, are going to endorse Kamala Harris. But the guys who maybe they're on the fence about this, maybe they just they're not particularly interested in politics, but they sort of see the election through the lens of how other guys are talking about it, not how women are talking about it, right? And so reaching those younger men, I think, is even more challenging because the ways that they get information are these very, very niche.
Targeted.
I mean, you're going to go on the podcast. I see the vice president doing more of these podcasts that are, again, more male focused, but like the guys who are talking about video games. That's, I'm sure, where a good percentage of Gen Z voters are listening to the dudes who are telling you how to get through different levels of video games.
Right, because you're sitting there watching Twitch. You're watching someone else play a video game.
Yeah.
And talking to each other while someone else is playing a video game.
But
right?
You're talking about, what I love about this is that they're also talking to each other while they're doing it, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
So, yes, I'm talking to you about this game, but I'm also saying, hey, did you guys know blah, blah, blah? Did you hear? Or, somebody's from a different part of the country and they start saying, oh man, the floods came through our town. Really? Oh, right. So they are having conversations that go more broadly than
absolutely.
This is the
idea. So I want to ask you
of,
one more question before we go. Go ahead, Nayyera, and then I'm going to ask you a question about the big issue on the table, this election.
Third spaces, right? The idea of it where you have other places to go to build community and connection. And for young men, that is very heavily online. That's also, Robert Putnam talks about this, the idea of loneliness increasing and how loneliness becomes opportunities for radicalism. All of this is academic theory. However, we all three of us immediately jump to video games as a dude space. The majority of gamers are girls. That's the majority of gamers right now, right? And so they are sitting there side by side with these guys, wrestling with these issues in real time. And what we don't know as olds is how much campaign advertising on the Democratic side, too, is spent in places like Fortnite and Animal Crossing, right? To have these characters and things pop up. So there is an awareness that's there, but it's disconnected from our awareness as this.
No, that's a very good point. That's a very good point.
As a rising class of middle managers and people in charge, that this is something pervasive that is not just about a specific campaign moment, that this generation is struggling with many of the same issues that Gen X did. They're just doing it in a totally different
way. 100%. 100%.
All right, I want to ask you one question about the big elephant on the table before we let you go. Is abortion going to have the same impact in the 2024 election that we saw it have in the 2022 election, where Democrats were able to stave off big losses in the House and gain a Senate seat?
Yeah. So my take on this is that it is still very much of a motivator. And so I think for the lower propensity voter who would be a Democrat, but is maybe feeling not great about the economy or still has questions about Harris, or for whatever reasons aren't particularly motivated to vote, this could be the motivator. What I don't think it is a the kind of thing that takes a swing voter, that person that right now is saying I'm undecided or I'm third party curious. I don't think it takes them into one camp or the other. I do still think that the bottom line issues for so many of those folks are their own sort of economic security and the feelings, as we started this conversation, about who could be a good leader, who can I trust that at the end of the day is looking out for my family, is looking out for my success, is not going to leave me behind. And that for them, abortion, I think they are, at least when I look at in our own data who these undecided voters are, they're predominantly pro-choice. And I think Harris has already won. First of all, she doesn't need to win the argument with them. But is it the salient issue in which they're deciding their vote? No.
All right. Well, Amy Walter, we want to thank you for joining us here on Trailblaze. It's so exciting to have you. Thank you for being here.
Take care, guys.
That was a fascinating conversation we just had with Amy. And once again, hilarious that we are talking about an entire demographic and they're not sitting here at the table. But I do want I want all of our listeners to understand that we do hire white men behind the camera all the time. We value diversity here at Trailblaze. But in all seriousness, right, this is a challenge of campaigns on who do you pay attention to, right? White union workers were a long-standing thing for the Democratic Party, and that doesn't seem to be the case right now, Jamal.
Well, look, I think white union workers are still a thing for the Democratic Party. As my friend Stephanie Shryock likes to remind me constantly, that when we think about these white working class voters, we're thinking about some guy sitting at a diner with a lunch pail, right? And maybe we should be thinking about that woman who's a couple seats over, who is trying to figure out if she can work an extra shift because she's got to get her kid picked up from childcare, or whether or not somebody is the helpers at her mom's house make sure she's getting her insulin shot, or whatever the other concerns are that she has in her life. So, or whether or not she's got bodily autonomy. I mean, it's something we've talked about on the show in the past. So these white working class voters are actually lots of voters, but it is still true that we've got to pay attention to the concerns, not just of white working class men, but we've got to pay attention to men. I think the Democratic Party and the progressives have spent a lot of time being focused on, these big progressive issues that we all care about. Are we going to make sure that we're going to have health care? Are we going to make sure there's going to be diversity and inclusion? We're talking about abortion and choice and those questions.